Films in Focus with David Sterritt is underwritten by The Movie House, your destination for first-run Hollywood and independent movies, and a digital portal to the Met Opera, National Theater Live, and special events worldwide in Millerton, New York, and on the web, themoviehouse.net.
David Sterritt is the editor-in-chief for the Quarterly Review of Film and Video, contributing writer at Cineast, film professor at the Maryland Institute College of Art, Robin Hood Radio's very own critic and guide. He joins us weekly. The films Benediction, Fire Island, and A Man of Integrity, which you are. Hi, David. How are you?
Well, which one tries to be? I'm doing well this week, Jill. How about you?
You would be surprised. I'm well. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad to hear it, and I'm not surprised. Anyway, okay, to the films. So this is, we are roughly halfway through Gay Pride Month, or I guess it's LGBTQ plus month. And so I have a couple of movies. The first couple of movies plug into that interest. The third one today does not. But let us begin with Benediction. This is a movie by a very, very fine filmmaker, Terence Davies. He's an English filmmaker. I knew him years ago. He's still around. He's still making movies, and he makes often very wonderful movies. And he makes often very serious movies. Not too long ago, he made a film about Emily Dickinson, the great poet, called A Quiet Passion. And now he has made another movie about a poet, and it's a very ambitious movie, and it's a very serious movie, and in a lot of ways it's a very poetic movie. It's not a perfect film by any means, but it's a really, really interesting movie, and it starts off by having an interesting title, Benediction. This is not the kind of title that, like, you see on movies in the Marvel Comics universe, for example. You know, this is a serious title, and it points on one level to the kind of religious interests that the movie has, for a while at least. But it goes beyond that, and I think among other things, this movie is Terence Davies's benediction on the very great poet Siegfried Sassoon, who is the main subject of the movie. So, what is the movie about? It is, in fact, about Siegfried Sassoon. He was one of when I was in college and I was reading Sassoon and other colleagues of his, like Wilfred Owen and Isaac Rosenberg, I was always told they were called the trench poets because they fought in the trenches of World War I, and they wrote some of their poetry in the trenches, and then some, the ones who survived, after the war was over, they remembered what they had seen and witnessed in the trenches and so forth. They're often just called the World War I poets, but that's what they were. Siegfried Sassoon, Wilfred Owen, Isaac Rosenberg, Rupert Brooke, a few others. And this movie is about Sassoon, and it's not a war movie, though. It deals a little bit with his wartime experience, but it deals mainly with what happened after World War I, and his wanting to capture those experiences and to just sort of write about the horrors of war in very sensitive poetry. And he was a very, very great poet. I think that a lot of the so-called trench poets were really first-rate poets, in my opinion, as an English major many years ago. But Sassoon was one of the very, very best. Of course, he had a wonderful name, Siegfried Sassoon. Can't get a better name than that. And he was a very active poet, and he certainly went through and suffered through World War I, and then lived for many, many years afterwards, during which he continued to write poetry, although some people felt it was no longer such good poetry. He also was gay. And this is a very, very important part of this movie. Terence Davies has always been an openly gay filmmaker, and he's made a number of his films deal in one way or another with the triumphs and travails of gay life. But of course, Sassoon was a gay man back when it was literally illegal and when you could get literally sent to jail. One of the characters in the movie Benediction, he's a secondary character, but he's a very interesting one, is a guy named Robbie Ross, who is an old man when Sassoon is a young man. And Robbie Ross had been very close to Oscar Wilde during his great turbulence in his life. And Oscar Wilde, of course, a profoundly great writer, actually spent years in the workhouse for being gay. So that's not in this movie. It's in the backstory. But Robbie Ross, who represented him during that time, is one of the characters in this movie, although a secondary one. So again, we're really reminded of how perilous it was to be a gay man or a gay person of any sort back in England of that time. And so what the movie Benediction is doing is it's exploring a couple of things. It's exploring Siegfried Sassoon's career as a poet, his experiences in World War I and afterwards, his travails as a gay man in England at a time when that was completely forbidden. Now, he was from the upper class, and so he didn't suffer as much as a lot of people did, and he had a lot of very important friends in the aristocracy. And we meet some of them along the way. Lady Ottoline Morell, for example, who appears to be an old lesbian and who is certainly a good friend of his and appears briefly in the movie. Also, I want to mention another poet who appears in the movie, another old lady, Edith Sitwell, who appears briefly when Siegfried Sassoon fails to show up for the premiere of her great theatrical work, Facades. So all these things figure into the movie in various ways. And if you're interested in poetry, if you're interested in English literature, you'll know about a lot of these things. If not, you'll learn about them through this movie. The trouble with the movie Benediction is that the whole long middle section of it just kind of veers from one love affair to another, and I found it kind of dull after a while, kind of monotonous. It's not nearly so interesting. The beginning, on the other hand, is superb, really, really magnificent, which shows the old Sassoon looking back on the younger Sassoon and going through a religious conversion, and it's a very, very interesting. And the end of the movie is very, very beautiful as well, where we hear the recitation of a poem and we see a broken World War I veteran sitting in a wheelchair, and it's very beautiful. My problem with the movie, or the movie's problem with me, was its very long and rather dull middle section, which wasn't nearly so interesting. But it's a fascinating subject, study, I should say, of Siegfried Sassoon. We also get to spend a good deal of time with Wilfred Owen, another one of the greatest of the trench poets of World War I, and we meet several other very interesting characters, many of them, probably almost all of them, from real life. So it's a fascinating movie, and it will teach you things that you didn't know if you go to see it. It's not Terence Davies' very best movie, but I think it's a lovely film, and I really wish everybody would see it. Among other things, how many people are making mainstream movies about poetry, not to mention homosexuality? It's a very, very refreshing thing to see. Speaking of homosexuality, and not speaking of poetry, let us segue to our second film today, Jill, Fire Island. Now, I, on the one hand, have excellent credentials for reviewing the movie Fire Island. I grew up on Long Island, which is just across the Great South Bay from Fire Island, and my family went there for little holidays. When I was a kid, we went to Fire Island quite frequently. As an adult, it was one of my very favorite vacation spots. I really love Fire Island. I've spent a lot of time there over the years, although it's been a while now. I really love the place. It's one of my favorite places on earth. That's my good credentials for reviewing Fire. My bad credentials is that I am not a gay man, and Fire Island is all about gay men. Now, turning back to literature, we just talked about a movie all about World War I poetry. Fire Island is loosely based on Jane Austen's timeless classic, Pride and Prejudice. We have a whole lot of that stuff going on. However, it turns Pride and Prejudice into a rom-com, a romantic comedy about gay men on Fire Island. And to tell you the truth, the whole thing left me cold. So that's where my bad credentials come in. I suppose the movie, by the way, has gotten ecstatic reviews from almost everybody. Not everybody, but almost everybody. And I suppose that maybe if I were a gay man, or maybe if I didn't love Pride and Prejudice so much, I would have appreciated Fire Island more for the various transformations that it works upon that classic. But I found the whole thing absolutely riddled with, full of stereotypes. Every character is a stereotypical character. Everyone is a recognizable type. Everyone has a certain pattern that we discover almost the instant we see the character on the screen, and that pattern remains unchanged through the whole rest of the movie. So that's my complaint about the movie Fire Island. I just found it full of stereotypes. Now, of course, a lot of movies, especially romantic comedies, are full of stereotypes. That's one of the things that we rather like about them. We recognize these characters. They're not fully developed three-dimensional human beings. They're people we're going to have fun with for a little while on the movie screen. So, okay, that's fine, right? I'm not always against stereotypes, but my gosh, every character in this movie is so relentlessly a stereotype. And, well, I just got tired of it and didn't much like it. I also rather criticized the movie for being called Fire Island. You get the impression that the whole of Fire Island is one great big haven for gay men. And by the way, the movie is almost all men. There are very few women in this movie. One major character, but everybody else, it's all totally centered on men. So Fire Island is not just one gigantic haven for gay men. It has a lot of gay men there, spend their summers there, or part of their summers there, and there are certain parts of it, particularly Fire Island, Pines, and Cherry Grove, which are famous for being havens for gay activity. Okay, that's great, but not all of Fire Island. I would have been happier if the movie had been called something like Fire Island Pines or Cherry Grove. That would have been more accurate, I think. So all these are kind of quibbles on my part. I just didn't enjoy the movie much. And I want to repeat again, my serious reason for not liking the movie very much is that it's full of these completely one-dimensional stereotypes where we know who this character is meant to be from the instant the character appears, and the character really never changes. Of course, there's a plot and people go through ups and downs and thises and that's along the way. Yes, of course. But the characters all basically remain essentially unchanged. And I just found the whole thing rather monotonous, and I got tired of it after a while. The movie was directed by Andrew Hahn and written by Joel Kim Booster. Joel Kim Booster, by the way, plays one of the main characters very well. Andrew Hahn made a wonderful movie just a few years ago called Driveway, which I really, really, totally recommend. But I didn't, much like Fire Island. And listen, if you want to see a good, I shouldn't say good. I didn't like it much. If you want to see a lively rom-com about gay men having a lovely couple of weeks in the summer, then by all means, run out and see Fire Island. Almost everybody seems to be enjoying it more than I did, but I can't say I recommend it. I didn't much like it. Our final movie today, Jill, is far more serious than this one. And it comes from Iran, and it's called A Man of Integrity. And that title right away signals this is going to be a serious movie. It was written and directed by Mohammad Rasulov, who not too long ago made a movie called The Force of Evil, which was all about capital punishment in Iran. I didn't think it was a fully successful movie, but it was, that movie is called There Is No Evil. I didn't find it a wholly successful movie, but a really serious movie about a really serious subject. And now we had Mohammad Rasulov doing it again. Rasulov, by the way, himself has been arrested a number of times because the Iranian authorities have not liked his movies. This one, however, did get out of the country, and it showed at Cannes, and it won a big prize there, the Cannes Film Festival. So, he's very much working. It's kind of interesting that just recently we talked about another movie which is out right now called Hit the Road, which is another Iranian film, which is by the son of a very great Iranian filmmaker who is not allowed to leave the country and is under all kinds of bans and proscriptions and things. So it really does happen in Iran with filmmakers these days, and A Man of Integrity is by another one of these filmmakers who's being persecuted by the Iranian authorities, but he persists in making his very serious work, and even though I don't think this is a wholly successful film, I'm delighted that Rasulov is working and making movies like this. It's very serious. So what is it about? It's about a man named Reza who runs, of all things, a goldfish farm out in the rural areas of northern Iran. And he apparently was once more in the swing of Iranian intellectual life, but he has retreated from that, apparently being persecuted, and has now he raises his goldfish. But there is a company which is always just referred to as the company. And they want to get a hold of his land, and they do awful, awful things. They poison his goldfish, and they just do terrible, terrible things to him to try to get a hold of his land. And he is all the while trying to fight against this while maintaining his integrity. As the title of the film tells us, he is a man of integrity, and he does not want to sacrifice his principles. He is told over and over again by people who know what they're talking about, if you bribed this official, if you bribed that important person, if you bribe that influential individual, everything, your problems would go away and you'd be all set, but he refuses to do it. He is not going to give up his integrity. And so that is really what this movie is about. It's not just about the kind of horrible problems that a person can face who doesn't go along with the system in Iran today. It's also very much about the challenges of maintaining one's integrity against all odds and the sacrifices that one has to make, and the big question as to whether one can come to a successful life while maintaining one's integrity in a system that is as corrupt as Iran. And I would say probably that is as corrupt as the system almost anywhere, because there is no such thing as a perfect society. We also have travails of his wife, who is a school principal, a head teacher actually at a school, and other people who we meet along the way. I found A Man of Integrity to be flawed by some of his acting. The guy who plays the lead character is very monotonous to watch. He doesn't change his facial expression. I didn't find him engaging as a psychological being. But his plight is a fascinating one, and again, I think it has universal or at least international resonance. And the movie is very, very well directed, although the plot gets a little murky at times. So overlook some little problems like the sometimes murky plot, like the rather monotonous lead performance, and you have a really, really interesting and very serious-minded study of the challenges of maintaining one's integrity when the system around one is corrupt. I recommend A Man of Integrity. It is by no means a perfect film, but it is a film very, very worth seeing. And that is my somewhat international story this week, Jill.
For which we thank you. The International Man of Mystery, David Sterritt. Films in focus. The films Benediction, Fire Island, and A Man of Integrity.